Hey, Clemson family, there is a lot to talk about this offseason. It's been busy, and we are going to preview also the NC State game coming up. But first, we got a little baseball to talk about, don't we, Daniel?
Yeah, I'm Daniel Shirley. The baseball team's been busy in the portal, and I think hitting some real strong needs for next year. I'm really excited about these additions that Erik Bakich has brought in.
Yep, I'm all about it. Great progress last season to close things out, and especially a hot start. And now there is some talent that needs to be restocked on that roster. I'm Bill Zimmerman. Welcome to the Reign Supreme Alway podcast. This is season 3, so to speak. We are glad you found us. We are really appreciative for all the people who have been listening all along. You can check out all our episodes at youtube.com/Clemson Kickoff, and that is the best place to comment. Get in there and say, hey, here's what I think of everything. You can agree with us, you can disagree with us, just be respectful, and we will enjoy interacting with you on there. We've even interacted with a few fans of other teams, haven't we? So let's get into baseball
You
first.
have, I have not.
That's true. That's true. Let's get into baseball. And three players coming in already, all offensive so far through the transfer portal, at least to accent that freshman class. It's also going to be pretty good. But we'll focus on this 3 transfers that have happened since the last time we spoke baseball in this episode. And it really starts to me with the Big Ten Freshman of the Year out of Purdue, a hitter named Luke Gaffney, 13 home runs, 349 average. Let me tell you, that really addresses a need, I think, for this lineup with some of the losses that they're having.
Well, I mean, yeah, you got to look at who you're replacing, and that starts with Blake Wright, right? And Will Taylor, we know to some extent, Will never really was healthy in his Clemson baseball career, so I don't think we ever really got to see him at 100% and what he could have been. But I mean, you've got to replace Blake Wright, you have to replace Jimmy Obertop, and there's other names as well. So I think that what you needed for the roster coming back, what you needed power and you needed versatility. And it feels like Erik Bakich and his staff have found that with the 3 names that we know so far. There could be more. You would hope there would be some power arms coming in from somewhere. Maybe that's in the freshman class. We don't know. But I like what they've done so far with these 3 guys.
Yeah, and a strong Midwest flavor to these transfers that
That's
are
right.
coming in so far. I think it shows that Bakich is very respected where he came from, having come to Clemson from Michigan previously and gotten them through the NCAA tournament very nicely during his tenure there. Michigan, not a program that you see that happen with very often. So I think it bodes well for Erik Bakich that he's getting guys from his former stomping grounds. One, Michigan specific, in fact, and that is infielder Colin Priest, 12 home runs last year as a Wolverine and 278 average. And again, Daniel, it just fits in a spot of need, doesn't it?
It does, and it's funny that you would think, oh, Erik Bakich was at Clemson, Colin Priest was at Michigan, and Colin Priest is coming from Michigan. Well, they never really crossed paths there. Priest said that staff did not recruit him to Michigan. It was the later staff. So I like this man. I really do. I again, versatility, play in the infield, play a little, a couple of different spots, and I think that's going to be key moving forward. And here's the thing for me, for these 2 guys, Bill, younger guys, right? You've got some time to develop them. Maybe a couple of seasons to develop them. We'll see. You never know with college sports these days with the portal and especially with baseball when guys can leave to go to the draft. But it feels like there's a little bit of time to develop these 2 guys.
Yeah, and to me, this is kind of what the portal is about, right? A guy like Priest who, maybe Bakich and his staff wasn't on him when he was a junior or sophomore and really tracking him up through the pipeline early on in high school. He gets on the scene, he blossoms, he does really well, and boom, here's a chance to go and play for a bigger program, a higher profile program. And again, that to me is when it makes sense for a guy to transfer and change schools and calls out all that upheaval to his academics, to his personal life, everything else. It just makes sense when there's a lot more to be gained by moving on. You see some guys just jumping in, I think, for the sake of jumping in, and this doesn't seem to be one of those cases. So 2 younger guys from the Midwest and one more hitter from the Midwest who is a grad transfer, and that is Dominic Listy out of Indiana State. He is an outfielder. Doesn't have a lot of power, 3 home runs last year, but a 324 average sure bodes well.
It does, and good outfielder. Just watching the film, he's pretty fluid out in the outfield, pretty solid. Clemson probably could use that. I think the Tigers will have Cam Canarella playing center. So it looks like Bissetta is going to play one of the corner spots. So you probably need to be pretty solid in the outfield. He feels like he can bring that to the team. Maybe he's the leadoff hitter. Who we'll see where he fits in the lineup, but because Cam Canarella was the leadoff hitter for half of the season, and then he moved to the cleanup spot. So that can all be fluid for sure. But this feels again 3 spots that really fill a need for this roster going into 2025.
Gaffney stands out among those 3 Midwesterners coming to Clemson. A fourth transfer as well. Let's look at all 4 of them here on the screen real quick. Josh Pano coming in from California Baptist in the WAC, 11 home runs, so another power hitter like Gaffney and Priest. A little lower average than Gaffney, a little lower on base percentage than all 3 of those Midwestern guys, but coming in as a senior, adding some ability there and experience. 38 RBIs, another nice contribution there. So might be a little more of an adjustment for him stepping up in level of play, but certainly valuable. And as we've seen some guys hit the portal and leave Clemson, including Nolan Naraki recently, also Nathan Hall, also Cooper Blauser. These are guys that Erik Bakich needs to have on board and is going to be able to put to good use. And again, you like to see them moving to a productive level of play coming into ACC ball and being able to lift their profile a little bit. And I do think there's more work to be done. And I think you and I talked about that before we hit the record button. And you mentioned the power arms, meaning the pitching. Yeah, the pitching staff has some things that need to be replaced. We've seen Billy Barlow depart for Florida as one of the transfer portal losses. So you hope to see things improve there. We certainly talked in one of the previous episodes that you can see at youtube.com/Clemson Kickoff about the lack of power pitching against a program like the Gators. It just was kind of exposed and really visible in the super regional this year. I think you go back to last year and the loss to Tennessee in the tournament. Again, not a lot of power pitching to quiet down those bats that the Volunteers brought into town. Went on to win the College World Series this past season, even though they didn't that year. But it just goes to show you that is a continuing need as they try to rebound from several years, maybe you could say, of not a lot of pitching depth. We've seen Spencer Strider do well from not that long ago in the Clemson program. We're now seeing Carson Spires really blossom in the major leagues. I think he's surprising a lot of people, doing really well, and you hope that he can continue to improve his game as a book gets out on him a little bit, that he can make this sustainable and really have a lasting effect. Spires family has a big place in Clemson athletics and baseball in particular. I believe, is it Bill Spires, I believe, was his uncle, who was longtime utility infielder and heck of a stalwart, I would say, in the National League. Milwaukee Brewers, one of the teams that he spent a long time with. So nice to see him doing well and bringing some fame to that name once again. And it's not just punting, as we've seen in recent memory, doing it. And when you and I were on campus, Michael Spires was a heck of a second baseman, if I remember correctly, but his average was always high and had a little pop to his bat, and just a reliable player for the Tigers back then. And I think we were hoping to see him do better in the bigs. So now it's nice to see Carson Spires get that chance and really, really shine, lighting up social media with highlights and stat lines. So that's the kind of thing that can help a little bit when you go into the transfer portal looking for guys to bring in. You can say, hey, we brought in Spencer Strider. We brought him in as a freshman, but you can come here as a transfer and thrive here and do well. So we'll see how things shake out. You can follow us, by the way, on Twitter, social media, Instagram, Threads, Facebook. Just look for Clemson Kickoff there, and you'll be able to track us down. So let's get into football. I think that's really what we all like to pay the most attention to, by and large. You and I love baseball, but football is definitely what puts Clemson on the map. And we're going to talk about the preview of the NC State game. The Tigers are going to come into this off of a bye week.
They are. And Bill, I think this is the best team in the ACC other than Clemson. I do. I know a lot of people are going to point to Florida State. Maybe some people will point to North Carolina or Louisville. I really like this NC State team. They've been busy in the portal. They go get Grayson McCall to play quarterback. On top of what they already have on this roster, I think this is the biggest challenge for Clemson this year to win the ACC. Again, Florida State. We'll talk about Florida State later, but I don't know that I trust them at quarterback at Florida State. I do trust NC State at quarterback. I like what NC State brings to the table, and I think this is going to be a really, really strong early season test for the Tigers.
Led by Dave Doran. He's been there quite a while now. He's had his chances. He's had some years where he has shined. He's won 2 of the last 3 against Clemson. Hasn't turned either of those into an ACC title.
No, he hasn't, and they've been close. But Bill, they've never been bad.
Yeah.
Right? They don't feel like doesn't it feel like he always gets the most out of his team? Now, I know there's individual games where they don't get it done, including at Clemson in 2016 when the kicker helped hand Clemson a national championship. But it feels like season to season they get the most out of their team, and that tells me that's good coaching. And I think he's a really good head coach. I think he's got a good staff. And I think they're going to be a tough challenge for the Tigers this year.
Yep, 9-4 last year, including that win over Clemson, and it was a close one. And I would say very similar to the Florida State game, where the Tigers played really well a lot of the game. Not good enough though, and maybe actually NC State had a better game against the Tigers than Florida State did. It's neck and neck. It's kind of different ways where each was a little better than the other in getting their wins over the Tigers. Clemson was just very lackluster in that game. Again, the turnover bug was hitting them hard. But once again, it didn't even get the Wolfpack into the ACC championship game.
Well, Louisville kind of came out of nowhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think anybody saw that coming. And look, I think Jeff Brom's going to build a good program at Louisville. I didn't expect it in the first year.
Right.
Feel like maybe they'll even take a little bit of a slide back. But no, this game that NC State beat Clemson last year was kind of the MO of the Clemson season, sloppy turnovers, at least the first half of the season, where it felt like they beat themselves as much as the other team beat them. So, and this is the game, remember, after the game where Dabo Swinney's standing next to Jeremiah Trotter and said, we'll be back. And, they certainly were back, the second half of the season.
Yep. Just surprised me, quite frankly, that even with Louisville's late season slide a little bit, so to speak, that NC State wasn't able to kind of rally and take advantage of that opportunity and get past them. It's kind of what the Wolfpack are built on, if you ask me. They kind of never quit, never give up. And I'll tell you, one of the core areas for them in recent years has been the defensive line. This year is going to be led by Brandon Cleveland coming back.
He's really good. He might be one of the top defensive linemen in the conference. Looking at a future pro, I think we're talking about here. And they have done really well with their defensive line recruiting. So, and portal work, all that. I kind of, when I say recruiting now, I kind of include the portal, but I love him as a player. Can't wait to see what he's going to do this year.
Yep. And then at linebacker, you start to see some of the turnover that we're going to discuss at several positions on the Wolfpack roster. 3 new starters at linebacker. And of course, they lost Peyton Wilson to the NFL draft.
They did, and he was probably the best player on the team last year.
Yeah.
So do you just replace that guy? Well, if you've recruited well, then you can, but we don't know what these players are yet. We knew what Peyton Wilson was, right? I mean, we had seen that, and he was a tremendous player. I thought he and Trotter were right there together as the best 2 linebackers in the conference. And we'll see what these new guys are going to become, but that's what stacking recruiting classes on top of each other does is, okay, one of these guys might be the next Peyton Wilson, but we got to find that out.
Yeah. And, I think people in other programs kind of know what Wade Woodaz can bring to the table, at least some element of it, because he's played a good bit. I didn't bother including the names of the new starters on the PowerPoint here just because I don't think they are as elevated and as noticeable in their play last year. Doesn't mean they won't get the job done this year, but it's going to be a very different group than we saw. at defensive back. Again, 3 transfers, I believe, are coming in, definitely multiple transfers in that group, but they are anchored by returning quarterback Aiden White.
I mean, kind of what I said about Cleveland. I mean, really good player. I think you're looking at a future pro, but the key here is the transfers. They had a lot of turnover from last year's roster to this year's roster. Bill, this might be the biggest question mark about the team is how those transfers fill in. If they step in and ready to play, this defense could be really, really good.
To me, you look at those 3 spots and look, I always expect them to have at least one good linebacker, if not 2. I always expect them to be good across the entire defensive line, tackles and ends, both. DBs, okay, look, in the sport of college football in general, it's hard to be just a standout year after year after year in your secondary. Bama's done it, Clemson's done it, a few other programs have done it, Ohio State being another one of them. This program, however, they lost Mike Reed when Dabo Swinney was able to hire him away from NC State, and they've still had a pretty good tradition of defensive backs. To me, it's just all this newness at once that's happening. And when you get into this matchup of Clemson versus NC State, and Clemson returning a lot of talent on offense this year, second year now under Garrett Riley, they're going to have a chance to be the group on the field that has knowledge and experience behind them and maybe take advantage of some inexperience, especially early in the season with NC State on the other side of the ball.
Yeah, I think so. And again, like you said, the key to that is it being early in the season. Now, maybe they play each other again in December. We'll find out. I think there could be a very good chance of that.
Yeah. So then maybe turnabout's going to be fair play because they've got Casey Concepcion back, just a heck of a wide receiver. They've also got Wesley Grimes coming in as a transfer. We all know that Clemson pursued him as a recruit. He went to Wake Forest, I believe, instead, and now is ending up at NC State. Those are 2 talented guys, and they're not going to be the only 2 talented players in that wide receiving core, judging by recent years. But they now will try to say, hey, you know what? Avion Terrell only started a few games or really contributed strongly in the second half of the season. Who's going to be opposite? Jaden Lucas, who's been injured quite a bit, but has the know-how experience under his helmet. You've got Shelton Lewis, who might be the starter on the other side as well. It's going to be down to Lucas and Lewis. Good luck, announcers, separating those 2 throughout every game of the season. But you might see Concepcion kind of move around, find the matchup that works for him, kind of like Keon Coleman did for Florida State last year.
He's really good.
Yeah.
I mean, can we emphasize really on video? I mean, I think he could be as dangerous as any receiver who Clemson plays this year. And I'm not saying he's the best, but in their scheme and in what they're trying to do, he could be the guy that really jumps off the screen at you. So he's going to be a challenge. There's no doubt about that.
Yep. One of the few key players who actually was with the Wolfpack last year under Robert Anae, offensive coordinator, who came in, and we'll get into him in a little bit. Offensive line, plenty of guys back, 4 starters. I don't know that you'd pick one out as really, hey, here's the latest and greatest and possible first round pick. But maybe, Daniel, you've got a little more insight than I do on that group.
Well, I like the group, and you know how I feel about offensive line play. I think we agree about that, where you have to be good up front if you're going to win. And having 4 guys back with experience, I know we haven't talked about the quarterback yet, but with that kind of experience, with a really darn good quarterback, that's what's going to make this offense go. Look, I know Concepcion is good. I just said what I think of him. If you don't have time to throw the ball and you don't have the quarterback to get him the ball, it doesn't matter how good that receiver is. So that's going to be a huge bonus for the Wolfpack. And Bill, it's one of the reasons like I said, I think they could be as big a challenge to Clemson as anybody in the conference this year. We've seen these great teams build up front. Alabama's done it. Georgia's done it. Clemson to some extent has done it. They've been pretty good on the up front, but not great at times. NC State is big and physical up front. That's going to be a challenge for the Clemson defense.
Yeah, and I think Devin Leary kind of didn't really get to have his way with Clemson last year. I think the Clemson defensive line last year had a pretty good day against the NC State offensive line and the linebackers as well. So that's going to be, just to me, a fascinating matchup to keep an eye on. Running back, hey, look at that. Another transfer on offense. It's Jordan Waters.
Yeah, really good player. Again, talent, versatile, can do a little bit of everything. And he's going to fit well with that offensive line. Just kind of like what we said about quarterback, having a talented running back like this.
Coming in
Look,
from Duke, do I remember right?
yeah, right. And they've been busy in the portal, and they've gotten guys who fit what they want to get done. So I think this is another good fit for them. And running behind that offensive line, it's going to be key for him, and will help him improve his stats to see if he's a guy who could play on the next level.
Yeah. So then you get into maybe the biggest transfer of them all, and there are a lot on this list as I look at them. But Grayson McCall, now McCall coming in from Coastal Carolina after Jamie Chadwell left, he stayed, but now he is making a move, coming over to NC State. He'll be in with Robert Anae, who kind of, I think, disappointed last year, maybe along the lines of Garrett Riley, as some people have expressed some disappointment with Riley in the offense in Clemson last year. He was supposed to have his guy in Brennan Armstrong, who had worked with him at Virginia a few years prior. Now he's going to McCall. McCall with a heck of a sophomore year, I believe it was, where he really burst out on the scene. He's had some injuries since then. His numbers have dwindled a little bit, not just in the aggregate, but also on some percentages, some ratings. But if there's any way to climb back, you would think that it would be joining NC State, which, again, just a tough-nosed program.
I'm a big fan.
Yeah.
Big fan. I don't know that he's an NFL guy. I'm not talking about that. I mean, as a college football quarterback, I'm a big fan of Grayson. What he did at Coastal, it was tremendous. And yeah, Jamie Chadwell left, and he stuck around. Maybe it didn't go quite as well with the two of them split up, at least for him. But I think he brings a lot more to this offense than Armstrong did. I was surprised how Armstrong struggled last year. And then NC State moved, kind of went back and forth at quarterback and never really felt settled the second half of the season. Grayson Marshall, my goodness, Clemson basketball from the 80s. Grayson McCall should settle that down. Grayson Marshall, by the way, it still hurts me that he got hurt and before the NCAA tournament that year in the middle of the 80s. That Clemson team could have gone on a run if he hadn't gotten hurt. But no, Grayson McCall, I think, has a chance to do some special things with NC State. And Bill, I knew I was going to say Grayson Marshall before we even started this episode.
Well, it's just like you've had to correct me when I said Bobby Miller instead of Blake Miller at one point.
That's right.
Me being a Dodgers fan and seeing that pitcher out there on the West Coast often. I told you, I foreshadowed it. I was trying to be careful, but I've done it too. So, hey, pay us more and we will be a little more careful, right?
That's right. That's right. This is a free podcast.
And we're committed to keeping in that way. Subscribe at youtube.com/Clemson Kickoff. So overall, I mean, I don't look at this team and see, well, there's the weak spot or there's the weak spot on defense or offense. Maybe by the time they play in week 4 and Clemson will have a week to kind of get a little extra scouting in, perhaps there could be some flaws that could be exploited by then. But right now, the squad just looks formidable up and down. If I had to pick a biggest weakness, I'd probably say the linebackers, with 3 new starters coming in and Peyton Wilson being such a talent and being gone. And I don't think any of those new starters, again, have that kind of, all right, well, I got faith in him being able to be in the right place at the right time, the way I think Clemson fans can have with Woodaz. But that is not like, oh my gosh, there's the link in the chain I'm going to watch for to break and see a catastrophe develop, because they do repeatedly have good linebackers year after year. It's a surprising lack of continuity for this team, but I think they're going to figure it out. And I think with Grayson McCall facing Clemson in week 4, quite frankly, he's got a chance to still be very healthy at that point, and that could be dangerous.
It could be. I like I said, I think this team is a big challenge for Clemson in 2024. Probably, if you told me to do
Lost you.
a power poll, I know everybody loves doing those, I'd have NC State second. I would. I think that they are right there with Clemson and Florida State. I know everybody's going to bring up Florida State, but Clemson, Florida State, Louisville, NC State, UNC, maybe Miami, that's the top half of the conference. I really like this NC State team.
Yep. It's to me neck and neck for the best new quarterback coming into the conference between Miami with Cam Ward
Yep.
and NC State with Grayson McCall, not Marshall. And then, not far behind is a very familiar face who's going into Florida State, and we'll get into him in another episode down the road. But yeah, this is no gimme, and App State is one of the best teams in the Sun Belt. I don't think you can call them a gimme. Georgia, obviously a national championship contender, and maybe one of the two primary title contenders going into the season, along with Ohio State. This is kind of a tough start, and like I've said before, it reminds me of 2017 season. 5 tough games in a row, new quarterback and Kelly Bryant coming in there. Clemson aced them all, but it was not an easy lift, and this is going to be another tough lift for the Tigers. They've got to be ready. They've got to be prepared. They got to be on top of their own game, and they've got to know what NC State is going to try to throw at them.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. Look, I don't think anybody has a tougher opener than Clemson. I mean, if Georgia's the national championship favorite, which a lot of people say it is, that's in Georgia, not in Clemson. I know it's not in Athens, but it is in Georgia. That there will be a huge fan advantage, I would think, for the Bulldogs in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. App State's really good. NC State's going to be really good. If you can get through that first 3 weeks, I think that's going to say a lot about what this team can be.
Well, and never mind Grayson McCall. In our next episode, we are going to get into the Clemson quarterback room. Never mind Robert and I. We'll get into talking about Garrett Riley a little bit. In the meantime, youtube.com/Clemson Kickoff. You'd think I'd be able to say it by now. Check out our past episodes and jump in there in the comments section. Hit subscribe for us if you don't mind. This is a free podcast. And until we get into those quarterbacks, I'm Bill Zimmerman.
I'm Daniel Shirley. Hat tip to Grayson Marshall. Go Tigers.